thank you, Laura Milewski, for joining us today in our podcast. We're going to be talking about selling in today's economy. And why don't we start by just sharing with our viewers a little bit about who you are and your background, and then we can go from there.
Well, thank you, Mark. I'm excited to be here. So I've spent the majority of my career in sales, with the exception of being a marketing strategist for several years under a global agency umbrella focused on the IBM account. But the majority of my selling has been done to marketers in the technology space. Currently, security, but prior to that, IoT, consulting. And I think fundamentally, I have a very clear position about how I approach selling. And it's build, retain, and grow. And that fundamental activation is really what's made me successful over the years and made a lot of money for companies over the years, because it's been intangible selling, with the exception of data destruction machines, but that's a whole other conversation for another day. It was a great rodeo while it lasted for 3 years. But I think selling is such a vital piece of the overall organization, whether you're a startup, whether you're a nonprofit, or whether you're an enterprise global company. There's a value to it. And you always hesitate, and my peers do too. You kind of go, when people say, well, what do you do? I'm in sales. And you go, oh, and then you wait for somebody to cringe. It has this terrible umbrella over it. Because if you said, I'm an engineer, oh, or if you say, I'm a VP of operations, oh, tell me more. Sales, gotta run. Because they think that you're going to ask them for the dollar that's in their wallet or on their iPhone. Like, it's crazy.
Oh my goodness, that's wild. Yeah, I did have a period of time in my career where I carried the briefcase and had the quota. And I can definitely tell you that there is, for sure, a different experience when you tell people that you're in sales. And I found myself using the term business development or market development instead, just to avoid the cringe response. So I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it's very real. It's very real. Or they think you're really wealthy, right? Because you're in sales. And you're like, okay, whoa.
Yeah, there's a reality to it, right? Like reality versus growth.
And there's a punishment too, because it's been my whole career, and I love it. I love it because what you're doing is you're really providing solutions that the market should consider. You know, you're not doing this for your health. You get up, you're stressed all the time. You've got to hit the number. You've got pressure. Your boss has pressure from above. You know, there's always somebody that's waiting for that revenue dollar, especially in today's economy. It is just a crazy different world from even just a year ago, selling intangibles to marketers.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think one of the angles that's really interesting is thinking about sales from the perspective of you're trying to help the customer. You have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror every morning and you know the brand that you're working for and that the brand is going to bring a value to that customer. So,
you know, I'm going to interrupt you because I want to stop at brand. You know, this is something that's really important. I think that whether you're in sales, marketing, again, engineer, whatever role you're playing in an organization, it starts with the company brand. What is that brand? And how are they representing themselves to help you be more successful for them? And then how are you and your brand representing them in the marketplace, especially in a sales role? That's really important to take that pause there. Thank you for raising that.
Really it is, because you were talking about the fundamentals of your framework. There's also just the fundamentals of brand and purpose and mission and making sure that there's that really nice synergy between who we are working for the enterprise and then basically what the customer gets to get out of it that creates that longevity, that creates that opportunity to retain and grow them after the sale. So,
precisely. And, you know, the customer can also see if you're really passionate about what you're selling. That comes through. I always think about the litmus test, right? And I wish that maybe down the road, as I reset my career at some point someday, I'm going to ask one question. How does your company define a lead? And I would love to just go around the room, and I'll tell you a funny story. So I remember having a senior IBM executive in the room several years back, and we were building strategy around where to go next with their event portfolio. And I asked the question, and there were probably 40 people in the room of this executive. And I said, how do you define a lead? If you want to make somebody uncomfortable, ask them, how do they define a lead? Because you will make them stop, take a pause. But more importantly, that's thought provoking. Ask anybody who's responsible for demand gen or field marketing. They have their KPIs. They're all putting that data into Salesforce. But how does the company define a lead? How do they define a lead? Mm-hmm. And companies are getting better at it, but it's such a provocative question that's hard to answer.
It really is. And they try to put a framework around it. So we talk about there's a prospect, and then there's a marketing qualified lead, and then a sales qualified lead. And then in many companies, there's even ways to define them in more granularity than that.
Precisely.
Structured in a structured pipeline. And then they associate percentage of confidence over the revenue based on where they are in the funnel. It's highly complex, I think, on the front side. And a lot of people really don't have an appreciation for how difficult it is to measure that, as a prospect comes through the funnel and gets more and more qualified. And even in some cases when people drop off, right? So when they're no longer a prospect, I think there's a whole nother conversation someday we should have about when you decide enough is enough and that particular customer has not identified that their need is strong enough that you should spend the time to go forward to continue to try and get them on board. Even if you know in your heart that you can solve their problem, at some point you have to not invest the time any longer. So I think that's worth its own topic someday. We should definitely talk about that.
It is. But, just to close on that, I think it is definitely worth pursuing on another conversation. I always say when I get to that point where I'm ready to close that door and move on, I ask one question. Well, I actually think about sometimes asking two. One, if this were your money, would you do this? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Coming out of your wallet and your checkbook. But two, if this were not about money, would you participate? Would you invest?
That's provocative.
Because that is a provocative question, right? Because it comes down to value. Mm-hmm. It comes down to value. And that's also a difficult question for people to answer. Because think about it. Buyers today are spending somebody else's money.
That's right.
They're not spending. I think that's another podcast, right? For discussion. Because whose money are you spending and how are you spending it? I recently was on a call with somebody and he said that his total quarterly budget is $15,000 to do marketing. And this is an enterprise company. And he just came over into the role. He was new in the role because we're seeing a lot of that going on in the marketplace, a lot of changing, right? Companies changing roles. He was only with the company for 3 months and he came from a company as large as the one that he was representing, with me on the phone or on video. And he said, I used to work in a $350,000 budget. Today, my budget is $15,000 and I'm expected to A, B, C, D, and E, right? Tough market.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. And that brings us to our core topic for today, which is really selling in today's economy, in today's marketplace. It has changed significantly, even just in the past 2 years or so. We thought that COVID was a disruption. Well, there's just as much happening now to change the face of selling as there was when we had lockdowns and work from home and everybody was trying to figure out their quote unquote new normal. I'd love it if you would share with the audience some of the things that are happening in sales in the marketplace now with the economic uncertainty and what that means for how you pitch.
It's really disruptive. And because I've been doing this for 20 years, right? I love buyers because they always teach me something, right? But today's buyers are not committed necessarily to the organization. They're committed to their role. They're committed to doing a great job. They're very committed to doing a great job, but they're also committed to, in their minds, what's next? Where do I go from here? Right? Am I going to get the promotion? That's a big conversation. If they're not getting the money competitively, they'll jump for $15,000, right? And then you're like, where did my lead go? Where did my engagement person who I've been working the funnel with go? And then they're just gone. They vanish. So we're seeing a major turnover. You know, if I take my funnel and I look at that funnel, people that I've engaged with literally 3 months ago, I go back in, it's like poof, their emails start swinging back and they're gone. I've never seen anything so radical in
Would
my
you
selling
say
career.
that's 15, 20%, 30%? What
I would say in the last 8 months, it's probably 30%. It's very high. The other piece that I'm seeing is, given the new administration, and I'm not going to be political here, but the fact is we have a new administration that is disrupting what the market is doing. The market went on hold. It went radio silent, I would say, for about 6 to 8 weeks, where marketers are just frozen in time. And I don't know what the communication from their leadership is, but you can see the hold. You can see the hold, right? They're also looking at where have they been in their marketing investment, and is it delivering the ROI that was expected? And they're seeing that slow itself down as well. Yesterday, I had an interesting conversation with someone, and we were talking about why, or the fact that when technology buyers are making a decision and an investment on a new technology that they're bringing into the organization, we know from our research that it's now 27 touches, different titles in an organization that'll make a technology buy, right? And this marketer said to me, she goes, that's because nobody wants to make a decision and own that decision. And she's been somebody who's been in marketing for 20 plus years. And she goes, I've always been in technology marketing. She goes, with great products, great deliverables, great engineers, like just really nice companies who do great work. And she goes, the reason it's 27, she goes, and it's going to keep climbing, is because nobody wants to come out and say, I made the decision to purchase XYZ technology. And if it fails, or if it disrupts the organization too much or too little, nobody wants to own it. And I thought that was a really interesting statement.
That is super interesting because, on the marketing side, again, we've gone from those 7 touch points, 10 touch points, up over 20, 30 touch points. And, when you talk to the marketing gurus, they say it's because there's just so much out in the ether. There's so much digital content. People are overwhelmed with media messages, and, it's very, very difficult to cut through the din. So you really need to have this ongoing pulse of outreach for them to even first recognize that you exist, let alone even consider making a buying decision or even engaging with a salesperson. It takes many, many, many pings and contact points in order to make that happen. So if we bring those two things together, the decision atrophy and the din of way too much content reaching people, and it's just overwhelming, I can definitely see why sales folks are really struggling right now, trying to cut through the noise, trying to get to the right people with the right message, and getting those decisions and being able to shepherd a lead through that structured sales process. It's just become almost infinitely more difficult than it was even just a short time ago.
On the flip side, when you do get the marketer who sees your brand representation and what you are committing to delivering, because I think overall the intent of every salesperson is to deliver value and deliver under promise, overserve, right? Whatever it is that they're doing. We have integrity, right? And our brand has integrity. And once they land, the other thing that I'm seeing switching historically, again, this is just my experience, is when I had a customer, that client and my relationship with that client was forward. And even if I would call them and say, hey, we're doing this, can we talk about this? Maybe this is of interest, where you are right now in your investment. They would take the call, right? They would get on the video screen. They would answer the email. And today, I think they're just trying to hold on to where they're at in the moment.
Oh.
And that brings us to another piece of the conversation is where's the strategy? Where's the strategy, right? Where's the marketing strategy being set? How are they going to market? How are they going to meet the demand of whether it's Wall Street or their internal owners? And how are they getting there? And I think a lot of the time, the marketers today actually don't know what the overall strategy is. And so as I'm helping them, they're going into teams and presenting my offering as features, not necessarily benefits. Because, I was taught early on, benefits sell, features don't. Features are the nice to have, right? And the other thing that we're seeing, at least I'm seeing, is sales leaders are making marketing decisions.
Interesting. Tell me more.
That's a really interesting shift. So if I'm talking with someone, whether again it's growth marketing, revenue marketing, demand gen, they're collecting the data. They're not empowered. Years ago, marketers were empowered. Again, back to the example I gave you of the person who has the $15,000 budget. He's still not empowered to spend it.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't have that final spend. He's got a budget to work around, but they're collecting the data. They're going into committee. They're then reviewing spreadsheets of opportunities to invest in. And so it's almost like there's an extension of the salesperson in the marketing organization that you're pitching to close, but then the sales leader comes in and is also influencing the decision. Another shift that I'm also seeing is a lot of the revenue marketing title and growth marketing title. The global events titles are going away. The growth and revenue are coming in. The other influencer in the decision making, when they're looking at the internal spreadsheet of collected data about investment, is product marketing. Yes. They have a strong influence. The marketers that are going to market, again, because I sell to technology companies, it's new product. They've just hired a new SME. They want to give that person visibility. But I absolutely believe marketing still plays a critical role in an organization, just as sales, but it's become granular.
So that's very interesting. I'm actually in the process of writing an article right now about how the face of marketing has changed because it's more about experimentation now. So I think one of the reasons why there's not the overall cohesive marketing plan that we all came up in, right? Like careers, we had the business plan, the marketing plan, the sales plan, and those things just kind of triangulated, right? And marketing, in part because it's become so data centric, because now you can measure things that you didn't used to have the ability to measure. It's turned into a science and it's turned into experimentation. Those are good things because the goal then is to deliver more value and to do a better job of marketing. But it does mean a reticence to actually put things on paper and to have a defined marketing plan because the marketing leader wants the flexibility in order to adapt as technology change, trends change, whatever the case is. Everything's moving so fast right now. And I don't think folks are really correlating that also means that there's a lot of uncertainty with everything that happens after marketing because those traditional models aren't being used anymore. So it's creating gray area and a little bit of difficulty, I think, on the sales side, because where you used to get, here's our messaging and positioning and all of that sort of stuff, marketing is A/B testing the messaging and playing around with it. Not that's a bad thing, but it creates uncertainty then on the sales kit, the PR kit, even corporate messaging, SEC messaging for public companies. What is the message? How do we talk about feature versus benefit? And all of those sorts of things are wildly nuanced now based on data versus just being in the playbook.
Yeah, I think you're raising a really important point. Too much data. too much data, and what is it giving them in the end?
What's it giving?
Because what I want to know is, once I sell something, I would love to know from that marketer, was that successful for you? Because I want you back. That's that retained piece. I want you back. And it's then turned over, right? And now it's in their sales organization. Are they following up on those leads? Are those leads worthy of the business? And so on. And that's a whole other conversation again for another day. But that's also the deficit when you're selling intangible products to marketing people is, was it successful for you? And that's also a hard question to get an answer from. But it's not just today. It's been over the years as well, right? Forever. Because even if my marketer said to me, look, I sent you 5 leads over the last 2 weeks, which were successful, I could actually go in and report back on those 5 leads. But is that going to give the marketer who made that investment to pull those leads in the right data to edit the go-to-market plan, to edit the behavior next? Or I don't know. This is the hard one, but I don't think it's ever been solved well over the years anyway, right? What's the methodology behind it? I think, what are you selling in the end, et cetera?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the reasons too why having a really expert level salesperson is so important, because what really matters is the voice of the customer and the voice of the market, to bring those kinds of feedbacks back into the organization, whether it's executive leadership, sales leadership, marketing, whatever might be appropriate. That touch point is really important. And maintaining the human touch point in the context of all the digital outreach that's happening, that can be very difficult. Now, certainly there are SaaS companies, for example, that they can go all digital. They have no salespeople. It's a subscription model. You have a click funnel and you bring people down through the process and they subscribe and life is good. But you and I, we're really talking about human-centric oriented selling, where you're building a relationship. And if you're lucky, a customer for life.
I agree. Yeah.
It's just a whole different animal. So we're trying to marry up digital with humanity and trying to make sense of it and make it work.
You're 100% right. I mean, the other thing is we have to look at this generationally, right? Because the way that you and I were brought up in corporate is not the same for those coming out of school today, the 30-somethings, the 40-somethings, right? The behaviors are changing. I was just having a conversation about interpersonal communication and how it's lost and it's worsening, right? And this was with my brother-in-law, who's a professor. And he said students aren't showing up for office hours. Now, this college is charging them $80-something thousand a year to be in the room. He's a great, great professor. He's passionate about young people learning. But they don't want to come to the office anymore. And they say, well, I'm just going to, go into AI and ask those questions and have those conversations. Wow. That's where we're at. When the learning is based on the knowledge base, right? And the knowledge share and the interpersonal connectivity between two people. Are we connecting between two people anymore? That's that going back to the importance of the face-to-face again. Nobody can take that away, that relationship building, that networking. But we also have to inspire people internally to want to do that more as well.
Yeah, there's a psychology to that. So much of what you're talking about feeds into the DNA of how a company functions and what they value and prioritize in how they want to engage their customers. There's a value system in there to some degree, to what degree they want to actually build a relationship with a customer for that long term, the retention and growth phases that you talked about versus just quarter by quarter, sales by sales. And so many companies, I think, get caught up into that, the customer acquisition and that quarter by quarter sales number. And don't you find that perhaps they're losing sight of the retention part and the growth part, taking those relationships and expanding them?
They are. But you know what? The majority are doing exactly the model that you've just shared. It is quarter to quarter. It's where's my dollar? And again, because I sit in sales, it's elevated in my world even more so. And it's not long term. That's part of corporate today. It's not long term, it's today, right? It's what have you done for me yesterday versus where are you today? And how are you going to get me to my number? And how are you going to have me exceed my number? And it's a hard place. Engineering has its requirements to meet their deadlines. It makes me sad because if those today grew up in our day and age through corporate, it was about doing great work together. And as a result of that, the customer felt that. The customer really felt that. Today, does the customer even want that? I don't know. I asked the question, do they even want that? Or do they just want to make it tactical, get it off their plate? They've, achieved X, Y, Z. They've hit their KPIs, and are they moving through? And I don't mean to be cynical, but I have history. And so I look at the world and I go, can we try it a different way again? And go back a little bit.
Yeah, I personally, I do miss that, being a gregarious person and really loving people. The more detached and tactical that we get in the process, the less joy personally I get in it. So I understand what you're saying. And the generational thing too, it makes me want to touch on another piece. And it's not necessarily by biological age. It's more about when someone might have come into sales or marketing, whether they did that at 22 or 42, they come into it and you get kind of blueprinted for that. Whatever that time was, that's where you learn and you build up the majority of your skills. And so then there's a period of time that you have to go through as things change, where you have to have enough growth mindset and elasticity in your willingness to do things in a different way, to adapt to new things. And one of the things that I love about you, and we've known each other a decade now at this point, is you're always on top of what's current. And I think people need to make sure to do that. And so if the market is changing in how they buy, the people need to change along with it. You can only have so much influence about how you personally want to sell versus how the market wants to buy. And you have to be able to adapt to it to be successful, even when you don't like the trend. Like, even if folks are not liking the tactical approach that people are moving into.
Yeah, that's how they're buying.
That's how people are buying. And so we're going to have to adjust to that and make the changes. So for anybody in our audience who's finding themselves in that scenario where the things that you used to do are no longer working, you have to do the time and the research to figure out how you need to adapt your sales and your marketing process in order to fit more how people are currently buying, even if it's difficult and it's hard, and even if it's changing your world into something that you wish was different. If you're going to stay in the profession, and if you want to be successful in that profession, you need to have the guts really to acknowledge it and figure out a path forward and what you're going to do to make the change.
Yeah, I think that's brilliantly said, because you also touched on, where are the leaders? How are they influencing, right? Their direct reports. Leadership has changed over the years. Change is really difficult.
It is.
And it means that an organization has to be agile. And if you're selling to the quarter, if you're worried about the dollar from yesterday, that agility doesn't come fast enough to meet the market demand. You can see companies that have started up and companies that have shut down, companies that have been sold off and been acquired, especially, again, coming from that tech side. But you can also see the companies that were future forward. And those two words are really underused, because future forward sustains that revenue. Future forward allows for positive change. One of the best sales leaders that I had in my entire career, and I've had 3 so far, 3. One was all about training. And it was Monday morning, get them in the room, and we're going to activate and we're going to role play, and you're going to leave this room ready for the week. It was training, training, training. The second sales leader was so green in the role but he was a brilliant listener. And he never gave you an answer right away.
Okay.
He said, let me think about this and let me come back to you. And the third leader, I'm an ideator, and that's not for everybody. But I ideate off of what I hear from prospects and clients and the broader world. And I would sit down with my sales leader and I'd say, what if we? And that question for most leaders is painful and they don't want to hear it. And that's okay. It's not for everybody because that means change. That means, all of the wording and everything we've talked about, right? What if we? And because I'm in sales, I can handle more rejection than the majority of people in the world because that's been my career. Take the no's, because when we get the yes, it's like you're rolling and there's nothing better in the world, right? He would take a piece of paper and he would draw a vertical line down the middle of the piece of paper when I had an idea and I brought it to him. And he'd say pros and cons. And he goes, let's do it. And it was a 5-minute exercise. Give me the pros, write them down. Give me the cons, write them down. And I would leave and he'd say, okay, you had more pros than cons. Go try it. Just like this was a large organization. This wasn't a small, company. That sales leader to this day I'm friends with, I have so much respect for that sales leader because there were more cons usually than pros in my ideation. And I would leave and I'd be like, okay, he didn't like that idea, but he knew because he was such a great leader in sales that I would come back with something else that would make him money. Okay. And when the pros were there was money coming in.
Okay. That's great.
That's simple. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the other piece, right? We have to go back to who has influenced our lives. How are they helping us be better, be more? But you also have to have ambition. Sales is about ambition. You have to want it. And I'm not saying selling 20 cars a month, the stereotype. I'm saying about really understanding your work. If you don't know, ask somebody. Let them help you. We're always in growth mode. And again, it doesn't matter if it's sales or any other role. Anyway, I'll stop talking because I get so passionate about this.
Well, it's great that you're passionate about it. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on as a guest. You are just such a pro and you've been doing it for a nice chunk of time. And, it's very true to who you are and your personality. And I just love that you're willing to share your insights. I would like to take a little bit of time and just talk a little bit more about insights for the audience in terms of what they might be able to do to address trying to get into organizations that are in churn, where there's turnover. Have you had a chance to maybe try out some different tactics that are still getting you in front of the right person to have those conversations?
Your gut will never fail you.
Okay.
Emails are still king. Here's a little trick. Throw in your calendar when you're asking somebody for a meeting.
Okay.
If you know that what you're offering makes sense for the prospect that you're going after, make it compelling. Give them the data. They need the data for the spreadsheet. Give them the data up front. Don't make them beg for it. Don't make them ask for it. They'll come back. I just had somebody come back 9 months later that I said, well, that was a lost cause. It wasn't. I'm still top of mind. And stay top of mind. Go social. Stay on LinkedIn. Post. Connect with people. Don't negate LinkedIn, even though it's throwing ads left and right. LinkedIn has a purpose, and it's strong. Be very careful about your political opinions. Don't post them. It's none of anybody's business except your own. But stay connected. And if you know that they've left the organization you were pitching them in, go to the other organization and say, hey, congratulations. Still would love to connect and follow through if the role is similar and there's a right fit. You can't ignore what's there. You can't ignore the relationships you haven't built yet. Keep trying, but also know when to cut them. That's the most important thing to your earlier point. You need to know when, okay, enough is enough. They're not going to respond. My time is just as valuable as yours. and yours is mine. Think about it as time. Everybody talks about churning, back in the day when you used to sell, you used to, have to dial for dollars. And boy, did I dial for dollars. Your boss wanted 80 calls per day. You wanted 5 connects or whatever, the quota was at the time. I think every salesperson should dial for dollars for solid 6 months and see if sales is right for them. Because if you're dialing for dollars, even though today it's so hard to get people's mobile phones and get connected, then, email for dollars. Because that tells you if you should be in sales. That also says, what do you like about it when you connect? And are you strong enough when you do connect? Because you only get 30 seconds. So however you're messaging out, however you're engaging in a conversation, remember, people have a very short span of time that they want to give you. And if they've given you your time, make sure it's valuable to them. Aside from, what it is that you're pitching and trying to sell and close. But yeah, know when to cut your losses, know when to keep going, know who your target audience is and know who your buyer is. Know your competitive landscape, stay connected on LinkedIn. You know what you're doing is working and you know what you're doing that's not working. If it's not working, don't keep churning in there because it's not going to get you anywhere. And you'll make money.
I love that. Those are some really great insights about how people can stay focused. I loved your comments about making sure that sales is right for you and doing some of that hard upfront work and just being intellectually honest with yourself about if you're enjoying it, can you handle the no's? If you take the no's personally, that's an issue.
Huge.
So there's a skill set there in terms of they're not saying no to me. They just don't see the value yet. This isn't that they don't think that I know what I'm doing or don't care about what my company offers.
Yeah.
They just don't see the value enough yet that they're willing to pay for it. And that's okay. The other thing that this conversation did was reminded me about something that I've encouraged marketing people to do, which is to either shadow sales or to actually take a sales role. Ask for, if they have an organization that's a learning organization, ask for a 6 or 8 month stint in sales.
I love it.
It is such a learning environment, and it really gives you that other perspective of what it's like to be on the receiving end of the marketing function, and then the pressure of advancing the pipeline and making the sale and having a quota or a revenue number. I think it's super, super valuable for any go-to-market person, marketing person, to have that experience. And if your organization doesn't kind of allow that cross-training kind of thing, ask to shadow and just say, hey, can I spend a week with our top sales guy, please, and be on his Zooms and go to a couple meetings and see the call reports? And can I do that? Because I feel like that will help me do a better job of marketing. Marketers need to be willing to ask that question. And you need to be willing to kind of feel what it feels like intellectually, emotionally, stress-wise, all of those things. And the marketers that I know that are the very best marketers, they know what it's like to sell. They know what it's like to own a customer relationship. They know what it's like to be the one that has to communicate, a project has slipped or whatever, those challenging things. It makes them better marketers. So from my perspective, I really want to encourage people to walk a mile in the shoes. And I think that there's a tremendous amount of learning from that.
Great advice. I love it. I love it. I really do wish more organizations were thinking that way. And maybe they will as we keep evolving. I think the other thing is if you see somebody on LinkedIn and, you look at their postings, you look at their videos, you look at their role, and that's something that you want to do, don't hesitate to reach out to that person. Again, they may say yes, but they may say no, and it's okay. Find somebody else. Don't stop. Don't stop trying to improve yourself. Don't stop trying to learn something new because you are so much more than where you sit today. Mm-hmm. And that's the most important thing. And being employed, your environment may not recognize that, but it needs to start with you and just keep learning. and keep trying and get as much training as you can to be even more successful. Ask, I'd like to your point, I'd like to shadow. I'd like to take a course. There's so many opportunities.
I love that because you're talking about really having a growth mindset, and you're talking also about tenacity. And you have to have tenacity to be a salesperson. You cannot
100%.
be a salesperson without being absolutely tenacious and almost a bulldog. And it's super, super important. There's a successful personality, let's say, that fits well in sales.
Yeah, I agree. You get out of bed and you go, okay, you don't start the day saying, how much rejection am I going to get today? You get out of bed and you show up and you say, okay, where am I going? How am I directing myself? And how am I going to generate revenue for my company and my wallet? And it's got to come from you, that your own persona, before it can go out to the world. But it's not an easy career.
No, it's not easy. It's not easy. I also think that's one of the reasons why people have the perception of salespeople as being ultra rich. They think about, okay, well, that is high value and you get paid for what you deliver. And so their expectation probably is like, okay, this is a career where I can make a lot of money. But then they get into it and they find that it's not for them. So it's not about some persona. It's really about, I think, for the individual, is this something that you get up, to your point, you get up excited about the day, excited about what you're doing, you know you're making a difference. And then if you do a great job, then you financially get to participate in that, which is awesome. But it takes a certain cut of person who can do that. Because if you just want the regular baseline paycheck week to week, and you can't deal with that kind of personal influence over how much you're making, then you don't belong in sales. There's an upside, but there's also the challenge, right? The upside, you're going to make more than other people, most likely, but there's a reason why.
Absolutely. And to those salespeople, who are going to watch this and listen, there's also an exit, right? At some point, because this career choice, at some point you say, thanks, but no thanks, right? And that's okay too. And we've seen a lot of shifts go on, with sales moving into marketing, people moving into sales and other roles, and profit for nonprofit. And there's always another door that will be open. We just have to decide which way to go and how to go. But sales is a wonderful career. It's an important career in the big scheme of things. And I think, hey, it keeps our economy rolling. But you can't do sales alone. I think the big takeaway here is sales is not an isolated job. Doctor walks into an office, diagnoses you. Okay, great. I'm a dermatologist. I'm going to remove that freckle. Not sales. Sales, it takes a team of people around you. You can't work in isolation. And that's an important thing to also remember here, because you're always asking others internally for help. You're asking the prospects and clients for help to do certain things. It's just not, thanks, I got to go next. There are sales that are next, but majority of salespeople, we can't do it alone. Can't do it alone.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so we had a really nice broad conversation today. Do you have any final thoughts or things that you would like to share with the audience before we wrap up this episode?
Thank you, Marg, to you for inviting me today. I think the wrap would be, yes, your roles are changing. The environments are changing. Be passionate about what you do. Love what you do. Show up because you love what you do. And selling has incredible attributes. And just keep improving yourself. Keep learning. Don't stop learning, because there is so much more out there. And just remember, you are not what your title is. You are more than what your title is.
I love that. Sage advice. Thank you so much. I'm sure that we're going to have some additional conversations as well, because we touched on a couple of things I think our audience would like us to go deeper on. So we'll plan on having you back again.
I'd love it. All right. Thank you so much, Marg. Be well.
Thank you, Laura. Bye-bye.